The facility shuddered as power surged through the quantum gate. A low, droning hum filled the chamber, climbing in pitch until it felt like it was burrowing into my skull. I swallowed hard, checking my readings for the 10th time. "Field stability is holding," I said, trying to sound confident. "We're actually doing this." Dr. Lin stood next to me, her expression unreadable as she studied the swirling distortion inside the gate's steel frame. "Dial in the coordinates," she said. "Let's find out what's on the other side." I exchanged a glance with Carter, our security lead. He had his rifle slung across his chest, his stance rigid. He didn't trust any of this. None of us really did. The mission was unprecedented. Impossible, even, because the location we were connecting to shouldn't exist. A signal had been detected, an old Earth colony beacon. But it was coming from the wrong side of space. The colony in question, Outpost Horizon, had been lost 150 years ago. Destroyed. Erased. And yet, something was still transmitting. And now, standing before the event horizon of the quantum portal, we were about to step into the unknown. I activated the comms. "Team, this is Lang. We're moving in." Lin exhaled sharply. "Proceed with caution." Carter took point. Mendez and Singh flanked him, rifles at the ready. I was right behind them, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Then, we stepped through. For a second there was nothing. No light. No sound. No up. No down. Then, the world slammed into focus. We emerged onto solid ground, but it wasn't right. The sky above us was black, not space, but a deep, unnatural void. Stars flickered wrong, shifting in and out of existence. The air was thick, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. And the buildings, they were intact. The colony stood before us, fully formed. Streets, structures, an entire habitat dome stretching out over a massive plateau. But it was impossible. Outpost Horizon had been wiped from history. The records were clear. The planet had suffered an atmospheric collapse, and the last transmission had been screams. Carter's voice was tight. "Where the hell are we?" Mendez checked her scanner. "The readings match. This is the colony." I turned slowly, trying to make sense of it. The air was breathable. The buildings showed no decay. The whole place looked like it had been frozen in time. Singh adjusted her visor. "We need to find the source of the signal." Carter nodded. "Move out." We proceeded cautiously, weapons raised. As we entered the colony's main square, my stomach twisted. The place was too quiet. There were no bodies, no signs of life, no movement, just stillness. Then, the first sound. A whisper, just at the edge of hearing. My blood ran cold. Singh turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Another whisper. This time closer. I swung my light toward the nearest building. Something moved. A shadow fast. Mendez snapped her rifle up. "Contact." Then they stepped into view. People. Or at least, they had been people. Dozens of them, emerging from the buildings, the alleys. Their eyes were wrong, glowing faintly, unfocused. Their movements were off, like they were glitching in and out of reality. Carter tensed. "Stand down," he called, raising a hand. They didn't react. They just stared. Then one of them spoke. But it wasn't speech. It was a chorus. Voices layered on top of each other, distorted and impossible. "You shouldn't be here." A ripple went through the crowd, their forms shuddering, warping for a fraction of a second. Mendez cursed. "What the hell?" Then, the closest one moved. Too fast. 1 second it was standing still. The next, it was inches from Carter's face. I saw its skin shift, flickering between human and something else. And then, Carter screamed. His body convulsed. His eyes rolled back. His veins blackened like ink was pouring through them. I fired, instinct, pure terror. The shot hit. The thing shrieked, its body glitching apart, like reality itself was trying to erase it. Carter collapsed. The others, all of them, began to move. I grabbed Carter, yanking him back. "Fall back!" Mendez opened fire. Singh screamed. The things came for us, their bodies warping, slipping in and out of the physical world. We ran. The ground trembled beneath us. The buildings shifted, as if the colony itself was alive. We turned a corner, and there it was. A massive tower. The beacon. It pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic glow, feeding into the sky like a signal calling out to something. We raced for the entrance. Mendez was shouting. Carter was barely conscious. Then, a shockwave. A force not of this world blasted through the colony. The air ripped apart, and for a fraction of a second I saw something else. Something beyond reality. A city that wasn't a city. A machine that lived. A presence watching. Then, it was gone. We burst into the beacon tower, sealing the door behind us. Panting. Shaking. Carter's breathing was ragged. His skin was still changing, flickering with patterns I couldn't understand. I turned to the others. We need to shut this thing down. Singh's voice was hoarse. What if that's what it wants? Mendez's hands were trembling. I don't think we're in control of anything anymore. I swallowed hard, looking at the beacon's core. The signal was still broadcasting. Still calling. And I had the sinking feeling. We weren't the only ones who had heard it. The beacon pulsed like a heartbeat. A slow, steady rhythm. A signal reaching out into the cosmos, calling for something. Something waiting. Carter was barely holding on. His breathing was uneven, his skin flickering between human and something else. His veins still black, his pupils wide and wrong. Mendez gritted her teeth. We need to get him out of here. Singh was already scanning him, her face pale. I don't know what's happening to him. It's like his molecular structure is shifting. I forced myself to focus. One problem at a time. The beacon was the key. We had to shut it down before the entire colony, and whatever controlled it, tore reality apart. I moved toward the control console. The display flickered with impossible data. Symbols that changed the longer I looked at them. Shit, I muttered. This thing is alive. Mendez glanced at me. Alive? I hesitated. Not biological. But something is adapting. Reacting to us? I tried to access the core interface, but the system rejected me. The screen glitched, flashing images that burned into my retinas. Earth, cities, history. Then, things I couldn't recognize. A sky ripped open. Structures that shifted like living things. A war. A war that never happened, not in our reality. I reeled back, gasping. Singh grabbed my arm. Lang. What is it? I don't. I struggled to steady myself. This colony isn't just misplaced in space. It's misplaced in time. Mendez's voice was tight. What the hell does that mean? Before I could answer, the beacon roared to life. A blast of energy surged outward, rattling the entire structure. The floor shuddered beneath us, and a deep, reverberating hum filled the air. Something was responding, and it was getting closer. Carter suddenly convulsed, his body arching. He let out a distorted scream, a sound that wasn't human. Then, he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. It is coming. Mendez stumbled back. What the fuck? Carter's eyes snapped open, and I saw the stars inside them. I froze. His pupils weren't black anymore. They were galaxies, swirling, endless, reflecting something vast and unknowable. Then, he moved. Faster than any human should. He lunged, his hands grabbing Mendez's wrist in a vice grip. She screamed, trying to pull away, but his strength was inhuman. It is coming, he repeated. His voice layered, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. Singh raised her rifle. Let him go, Carter. Now. Carter's head tilted. His expression was alien. Then, he released her. Mendez staggered back, panting. Her wrist was blackened, veins pulsating like something had tried to rewrite her. Carter turned his gaze to me. And I heard it. A voice. Not in my ears. In my mind. You open the door. The air split apart. A shock wave ripped through the colony. The beacon's glow intensified, sending out a final pulse. And then, the sky shattered. I felt it before I saw it. A wrenching sensation like gravity had flipped. The air vibrated, distorting like heat rising off pavement, but colder. And above us, the void changed. The stars weren't flickering anymore. They were moving. No. They were eyes. Watching us. And beyond them, something else was coming. Something vast. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. The colony screamed. Not the people, the buildings. The very structures groaned, shifting, warping as if the laws of physics were breaking down. The figures outside, the not people, collapsed to their knees, their bodies flickering. I realized, with a sickening jolt, they weren't supposed to exist. They were echoes, glitches in. The sky was breaking. The air warped, stretching like liquid, twisting into impossible spirals of motion. The colony was collapsing under its own unreality. And above us, the eyes. A constellation of watching things. Not stars, not celestial bodies, but awareness. A sentience so vast I felt my mind slipping just from perceiving it. Carter stood in the center of it all. His body was still human-shaped, but barely. His skin rippled like a mirage, shifting through versions of himself. Different ages, different possibilities, different lives. His voice was every version of him speaking at once. It was never supposed to be seen. I backed away. What was never supposed to be seen? Carter turned his gaze to me. And I saw. Not with my eyes. With my mind. A vision poured into me, too much, too fast. A ship, ancient and broken, drifting through an impossible rift. A lost crew. A desperate experiment. The colony wasn't a place. It was a mistake. A fragment of time and reality that never should have been. And now we had woken it up. The beacon wasn't sending a signal. It was a warning. And we had ignored it. Mendez was struggling to pull Singh away from Carter. Singh's nose was bleeding, her eyes glazed, her mind locked in whatever Carter had shown her. I grabbed her, shaking her. Singh. Snap out of it. She blinked. Focused on me. Then, she screamed. I spun. And saw them. The watching things were moving. The sky itself peeled apart like a wound splitting open. Something vast and many-limbed was reaching through, a presence so incomprehensible my brain rejected it. I heard whispers. No, memories. Memories that weren't mine. Wars that had never happened. A galaxy burned to nothing. A warning etched into the bones of reality. Mendez grabbed my shoulder, her voice sharp. Lang. We have to go, now. Carter laughed. Not him. Not anymore. Something else wearing his shape. You can't run, he said. You're part of it now. I raised my rifle. We'll see about that. I pulled the trigger. The bullet never hit. It stopped midair, frozen in time. And then reversed. The gun exploded in my hands. I hit the ground hard, my ears ringing. Smoke curled from my ruined weapon. Carter, the thing that had been Carter, smiled. This moment is ending, he said. You should say goodbye. The colony convulsed. Buildings collapsed inward. The streets twisted into spirals of fractured space. People, or what was left of them, came apart, their bodies unraveling into threads of light and memory. The rift above us opened wider. And something stepped through. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was an event. A concept given form. And it was erasing everything. Mendez grabbed me, hauling me to my feet. The portal, Lang. We have to get back to the portal. I turned. The entrance to the facility was barely holding together, flickering between existing and not. Singh was already running. Mendez shoved me forward. Move. We ran. Behind us, the colony ceased to be. One by one, buildings collapsed into nothingness. The timeline itself was being consumed. Carter didn't chase us. He simply watched. And as I looked back, just before we reached the portal, he whispered, You brought this on yourselves? And then, the world ended. We jumped. Straight into the portal. And into hell. We should have never come back. We collapsed through the portal, spilling onto the facility floor. My vision swam, my body feeling like it had been turned inside out. The air was thick with static, reality itself humming like an overcharged circuit. Mendez gasped, trying to crawl forward. Singh was retching, blood running from her nose. The portal behind us screamed, a soundless pressure in my skull, like the fabric of space was protesting our return. I turned, and saw the colony collapse. Through the shimmering quantum veil, the last fragments of that impossible world were being devoured. The sky shattered, the ground imploded into itself, and Carter, or what was left of him, just stood there, watching. But he wasn't alone. Something looked back at us. Not a creature. Not a presence. A knowing. It saw us. It knew us. And it wasn't letting go. A shockwave ripped through the lab. The portal convulsed. The entire structure shook as alarms blared from every direction. I scrambled to the control panel, desperate to shut it down. Sing. Kill it. Now. She tried. She really did. But the system wasn't responding. Because it wasn't ours anymore. A voice, Carter's voice, but layered, broken, echoing from a place beyond time, spoke from the speakers. You left the door open. Mendez grabbed my arm, eyes wide with horror. Lang, look. I turned, and saw the portal split open. Not close. Open. A wound widening. The facility lights flickered as the air itself became thick, pulsing, warping. And then, they came through. Not Carter. Not the colony. The things that had been watching. Reality bent as they moved. Not walking. Not existing in the way we understood. Just arriving. I felt my mind unravel. Images poured into my brain that shouldn't have fit, galaxies frozen mid-collapse, stars turning to bone, time splitting like shattered glass. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only understand. They weren't invading. They were correcting. We had stepped into something we were never meant to see. And now they were fixing the mistake. The floor cracked. The lab screamed. Mendez was pulling Singh back, dragging her toward the emergency bulkhead. Lang, we need to shut it down. I slammed my fist into the control panel. Sparks flew, the screens flickering with unreadable symbols. I had one shot. One last shot. I forced the failsafe override. The system howled. The portal convulsed, collapsing in on itself. The last thing I saw before it closed was Carter smiling. And then, the rift imploded. The shockwave ripped through the lab. Darkness. Nothingness. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the portal was gone. The air was still. The facility was in ruins, sparks raining down from flickering lights. Mendez was slumped against the wall, coughing. Singh lay beside her, unconscious but breathing. We were alive. But something was wrong. I looked around. The space felt off. Like it wasn't quite the same as before. And then I noticed the screens. They were still on. Flashing symbols. Warnings. I read them. And my blood ran cold. Mendez staggered to my side. What is it? I didn't speak. I just pointed. To the date. The system clock wasn't wrong. It wasn't glitched. It was telling the truth. We were 3 years in the future. And we weren't alone. Somewhere deep in the facility, something else had come through with us.